Welcome everybody to today's episode of the Conscious Grief series. I am delighted to be here with my teacher, Siri, today. So thank you very, very much for being here.
I'm so happy to be with you, Tara. Thank you.
I forgot to say that Siri is a Kundalini yoga teacher and trainer, and I trained with Siri in Hollywood a few years ago. And I know that she has a huge heart and she always holds this amazingly compassionate, nurturing space in her classes. Anybody who's been to one of her classes knows what I'm talking about. And I just felt so strongly that I really wanted to have you on this series and hear more about your personal story, which I don't really know about, but I had a feeling that you could relate very strongly to this subject. So my initial question to you, because I have been asking everybody this same question because it's kind of an interesting interpretation that people have around grief. So what would be your definition of grief?
My definition of grief has definitely changed over time because I was thinking this morning about coming here and being with you, and I feel like I am, and of course we all are, such a product of our environment and society, of what's accepted and what's not accepted. So I would say that, 15, 20 years ago, I would have a relationship with grief that was very small, very private, and then you just get on with things, right? If you think about our society, we reward people so much. Oh, Susan lost her husband, and 10 days later, she's back working 12-hour days. Look how amazing Susan is doing. Well, actually, Susan is dying on the inside and like a robot, and probably can't feel anything. And she's actually not doing well at all. Probably what Susan would, the healthy thing that Susan would do would be sitting in a room wailing and releasing her grief. So my relationship with grief has definitely changed over time. I would say that grief is honoring truly and honestly and authentically honoring the process of loss, of loss of love, of loss of a situation, of whatever the loss is, that you fully acknowledge and honor it and take your time to do that. And that might be writing, that might be crying it out, sobbing it out. It may be a lot of conversations, telling the truth, sharing with safe people, therapist, loved ones. So now my relationship with grief is a lot more active and conscious in the way that how much space needs to be held around it. I think from teaching yoga for so many years, I feel like one of the spaces that I hold, and now I love holding, but in the beginning was quite overwhelming, was how many people come to yoga and meditation and finally are in a safe enough space to shed all of the unshed tears that they have inside of them. There was this lady that came when I first opened my studio in Australia, so like 18, 19 years ago. Oh, just the most beautiful woman. But she'd been caring for her husband. He had Alzheimer's for about 3-4 years. She came 5 days a week and she sobbed through the whole class. I think for 5 days a week, I think for 6 or 7 months. And then I remember her coming to me one day after class and going, I didn't cry today. Like it ended. I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried because I'd been holding everything together, being the strong one so much. So that was kind of intense for me as a teacher right off the bat when I first started teaching for this class. And then this one woman just absolutely sobbing. But I started to realize, wow, the gratitude that I felt for finally she had a safe space to come to and cry and grieve and let the tears flow. So now I honor it so much. You know, you were talking to me before about the mannerisms of different cultures, and I think the Australian culture is very similar to the British culture of putting on a brave face, and especially in Australia, she'll be right, mate, you know, just get on with it. And so growing up in that culture, it was a little like, oh yeah, Americans feel their emotions and go to therapy and they do that, but we don't need to do that. It's almost like a superiority thing, like I don't need to do that. But I think going through enough of my own grief and loss gave me a different understanding, experience, and it helped me not be afraid of my grief and other people's grief so much.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point about not being afraid, because so much of the time when somebody is in a lot of pain, you know, a lot of people don't know how to be around it or how to hold the space. And I think yoga, why it's like Kundalini yoga, even more for me personally, brings up emotion. Like Hatha Vinyasa yoga also, you know, I would have definitely outpouring of tears and emotion. But Kundalini was just another layer completely, where I would really just sit and cry and cry and cry in your classes particularly. But why do you think that is about the practice of Kundalini?
I think it's a few different things, and I've had many discussions about it, and just, of course, my observations over the last 20 years or so. I think the first thing that is so simple that people overlook but so profound is that we close our eyes.
Yeah.
So it's a very sacred act to close your eyes and turn within. Because if you think about our lives, we're so busy with the external. Okay, I'm going here and I'm driving here and I'm going here and I've got to tick that off I've got to drop the kids to school and then I've got to get to work and then. So we're in our minds, in our intellects and all of these things. I'm listening to the news, I'm doing all of these things, right? Multitasking. Nowadays, checking social media, email, all the things. And then what I see is the students come into class and then they close their eyes and turn within. And it may be the first time that they're with themselves that day, that week, that month. And when we close our eyes and turn within and we don't have those external, so we hear the siren go by, right in the middle of LA here. We don't have those external distractions so much, we can actually feel how we feel. And pretty much every person has unprocessed sadness. You know, something happens to us, someone says something to us, and we go, huh. And we don't even let ourselves often feel, oh, that really hurt. That really hurt my feelings. It might be in a business meeting, it might be a family member, and we just have to go on like a tumbleweed kind of to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so to pause and to be with ourselves and then to move and breathe into our lungs, into our heart center, into these places, energetic places that hold a lot of our stored grief and emotion, move through our lymphatic system, our nervous system. So we start to feel all of the places that we have shut down and armored up because of our grief. You know, we get that broken heartedness, we go through challenging times, and then we just go, okay, I need to soldier on, literally, into my life, into the world. There isn't enough time for this. You know that saying, oh, you know, I'm afraid to let myself cry because I feel like I won't stop if I let myself start. It's not true, but we have this intellectual analogy that if I let myself feel my feelings, it will be so overwhelming and it will never end. Any of us that have actually sat and fully sobbed or fully allowed our anger, our rage, whatever emotion, we know now, oh, it actually passes. I love that quote. Joseph Campbell says, every feeling fully felt is bliss. So even our grief, our sadness, if we fully honor it and fully feel it, it passes and we get the full relief and experience and honoring of it. And I think that adds to like what you reflected before, then when you actually let yourself feel it, it's a little like going into a dark room, going into the cellar that you've been afraid of and turning on the light and realizing it's not so bad. I think our grief is very similar, that actually the fear of it grows the more we resist it. And actually, if we let ourselves sit in it and allow the tears to flow and are with a trusted person or people, and we realize, oh, I'm still loved, I'm still accepted. I think I had that feeling before of my identity was very much on being the positive one or the happy one or the uplifting one or the one who helped everyone else. So it took me some time with some trusted friends to really see in their eyes and experience, oh, I broke down and I don't have to apologize for it. One dear friend, my oldest friend in LA, I remember he texted me after we went out for dinner and I was going through all my visa stuff and it just had been so stressful. And I cried at dinner and I was just mortified, sent him like some message. And the next day he sent me a message. Oh, you know, I love you so much more and feel so much closer to you after last night. And I was like, great. So I think the people around us, our own experience, our own growth, and having the right, safe, loving people around us, we can start to come back to that wholeness of, oh, I'm a human being. I grieve. I get angry. It's part of the whole experience. It's nothing to be ashamed of or to hide.
Absolutely. And I wonder what it is that makes us say, oh, I'm sorry when we cry. I wonder where that comes from.
I think part of it is what we're taught as children.
Yeah.
Don't cry. You're okay. You're okay. And sort of like, I'm not okay. Harsher than that. Stop crying.
Yeah.
But even just the messages of, don't cry. You're okay. Trying to quieten the cry. As I know, you know, a lot of the parenting that I've done with my daughter, of helping her feel her emotions and hold the space for the fullness of her emotions, has made a lot of people around me very uncomfortable.
Right. Interesting. Yes.
So I think we haven't been taught that, oh, to really cry when you hurt yourself, or to really cry when you're upset, or to really be able to, you know, we don't say anymore, children should be seen and not heard, but the feeling is there. Anybody who has had a child and is on an airplane, in an airport, in a restaurant,
yeah,
people's eyes are looking at you. Children should be seen and not heard, and you feel it very strongly. So I think we get so many messages, obvious and subtle, that this is something that you do very privately, if you do it at all.
This is true. It's so true. And I feel sometimes that the power of something like yoga or somatic movement, any modality that is about our body and experiencing our bodies, because we can be so shut down in our grief or in our emotions, and even doing therapy or groups, that's all talking. And sometimes we can be really good at like deflecting our feelings or using, you know, just talking over our feelings, which is why I think it's so powerful to have a practice like yoga, because it can move things in a different way. What would you say about, yeah, the movement in Kundalini yoga and how that can access our emotions?
Well, we do a lot of work, as I was saying earlier, when we're working with the lungs and the heart center, we do a lot of, arm movements where we're working and pumping the lymphatic system and pumping the lymph glands. And so if you think about even exercise that people are doing, they are usually keeping this area kind of still and closed. So to do things where you stretch your heart center and open, people have come to me many times saying, oh my gosh, I feel like I have this ache here. Or even more, they're like, am I having a heart attack? Because they feel such constriction and pain actually in even opening this area. It feels too scary. Sometimes I see people move into camel pose or cobra pose, any of those extension postures, and the tears just come because they had been holding so much armor and so much pain here. So what I see is the movements, twisting movements that we do through the lungs, through the heart, excuse me, starts to stir all of these repressed emotions that we thought we'd kept a nice, neat little lid on. And suddenly, as you said, we start to move the body and free the body and open up. And there's this opportunity for them to move. And often you don't know what you're crying about. It's not something intellectual. It is just the pure emotion that has been stored there that starts to flow and move. And as we know, it's often we need to feel our tears in our eyes, our emotion, to be able to soften. Because most of us, by the time we're adults, have gone through enough disappointments or heartbreaks in our life that we have a certain amount of armoring.
Right.
And then dissociating from our bodies. As you said earlier, a lot of people, it's been too painful to even be here in their own bodies, in their own hearts. So they're just out of their bodies a little, numbly moving through life.
Yes.
Where's the coffee for the morning? Okay, go to work. Okay, how do I relax at night? Drink something, smoke something. Okay. And it's just the self-medication through food, through sex, through all of the ways that we numb ourselves out and try and escape what we're really feeling. That, yeah, you come to a yoga class and it drops you into your body. And then, as I said earlier, your eyes are closed and you're, the most with yourself, the most with your internal world than you are any other time.
Absolutely. And I was curious, because I've never had the opportunity to ask you before about how, because I know that you're a professional ballet dancer, and how you found Kundalini yoga, and sort of more about like your personal experience of the yoga and how it's supported you in difficult times in your own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I was a ballerina with the Australian Ballet, and I did all sorts of yoga and meditation really throughout that time from when I was about 18. I found Kundalini actually when I had, I'd done probably the biggest injury that you can do as a dancer is rupture your ACL, your cruciate ligament. So I did that, and the rehab is 9 to 12 months every day, all day long. So, you know, I was reading more spiritual books. I had time to do a lot more of my spiritual practice, and I found Gurmukh's book, The 8 Human Talents, and it has a couple of exercises at the end. So I started doing that. Oh my gosh, it was the day of VHS videos. I ordered Nirvaya's VHS videos. Some of you young people will not even know what they are. And so I started just practicing on my own because there wasn't a teacher there in Australia where I was. And I just noticed the effects immediately. Like 1 3-minute posture, I had the tears streaming down my face, and I'd practice Iyengar, Vinyasa, Ashtanga. I'd practice Vipassana meditation, Raj meditation, a lot of Tibetan Buddhism and Zen meditation. So I'd done all sorts of things. So it wasn't like a spiritual practice was new to me. It's just this depth of connection was new to me. And then I went back to dancing after I rehabbed back to performing. And I noticed that even if I did 1 or 2 of the exercises before I went on stage, I was just connected. I guess now I would say I was experiencing yoga, union, rather than being outside of myself, kind of critiquing myself. And so, gosh, I was like, wow, what is this thing? I started practicing with some of my friends together. And one of my dearest friends who was practicing with me, she started to get memories of childhood abuse. And so I would see her cry and her go through. And so we held this space for each other. And then, 10 years for a ballerina is actually a pretty long career. It sounds crazy, but yeah, you're a really old person by the time you're 27, 28 in the ballet world. And so I was looking for something else, and I thought I was going to do psychology actually. And this practice just changed me so much that in a meditation one day, I saw myself sitting in front of a group teaching. And I just had that very simple inspiration of, this has made such a positive impact on my life. Wow, could I actually share this with other people so that they can, my anxiety just went from, 80 to 10. I pretty much had insomnia since I was a little girl. I remember my dad, when I was little, saying, "Sweetie, bed is a place to sleep, not to think." Mm-hmm. So I think I just had that active mind. Yeah. So it completely changed my experience in myself and in processing stress in the world, from anxiety, from sleep, from just this sense of calm. I was always this very kind, compassionate person. Like in the ballet, they called me the company, counselor, psychologist, but I had a lot of internal stress. And that just in, a few months of practicing, that completely changed. So in my holidays in the ballet, I came over here to LA because I'd read Gurmukh's book and did classes and saw their studio, Golden Bridge, and just immediately was like, wow, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back and open the first studio in Australia. And so I did that. Like, I did teacher training in New Mexico, the 1-month training, and then went back, and a month later opened my studio. And people came, and just to see the changes, to witness people in front of you change before your very eyes. And as I said about that lady, move from so much grief to peace, or so much stress, or doubting themselves, not knowing who they are, to coming back home to themselves and building their internal strength just straight away. I really was very touched and thinking, this is the best job ever, that I get to witness this transformation in front of my eyes.
Amazing. And how has it supported you through your more challenging time? I mean, obviously you came through it during a challenging time, because it was when you had injured yourself. So
yeah, and that injury is one that they're never sure if you can dance again. So,
right. So that was a huge grief in that.
Yeah. So it absolutely supported me through that. And then, of course, when I look back, it absolutely supported me I had decided when I was 6, I told my parents when I was 6 that I was going to be in the Australian Ballet. And of course, like parents with a 6-year-old girl, was like, oh yes, darling, right. But I knew it, right? So that had been my identity since I was 6 to 28. Never had faltered, never had doubted that that was who I was. So when I look back now, and I've seen so many of my other friends struggle with, that's all I ever knew. What else is there in the world? I see now it supported me in that transition so much. First of all, my own practice. And then, oh, I love to do this too. Wow, what a blessing. Oh gosh. Yeah, I really, as I was saying earlier, I feel like I could have a PhD in grief with this lifetime, with how many people I've lost. You know, I lost many people close to me when I was a child growing up. So I was very familiar with grief and with loss. But I would say the first big conscious grieving that I did was after having my yoga studio in Australia for about 18 months. This beautiful man, Mark, he found the yoga studio. He'd never done yoga before. Very successful businessman. He was kind of in that like the successful group of businessmen and like the party group in Sydney, you know. But he was looking for something else. And anyway, he came to class. Within the first week, he got sober. He literally changed in front of our very eyes. He was like, oh God, I'm that weird dad now that plays mantra when I go and pick up my kids, and I'm blasting out these mantras in my car, meditating every morning. He found like such a peace in himself so quickly. He came on a India trip that I took students on to go to the yoga festival in Rishikesh. But on that on that trip, I sat next to him on the plane, and he told me a lot of his tragedies of his life. And at that moment, I could tell that there was a lot of unprocessed grief and a lot of unprocessed pain. And you know what he was? He was one of those, he reminded me of Robin Williams in the way that he just was making everyone laugh all of the time and helping every person, including me with a new yoga business. I moved to a bigger center. He like helped so much. He helped like nearly every person in our community with their business and just made everyone laugh. Anyway, long story short, he took his own life. And so me as a new teacher, 18 months, I had to really go through those questions of what could I have done anything? He kind of disappeared. He was coming to my class all of the time. And then for about 7 or 10 days before it, he started to go to some of the other teachers. And I just thought that was good, actually, in a way of like, oh, students should go to other teachers. Anyway, it was the first grieving that I did. So I found out at December 21st that night. And I was solstice. I was teaching class the next morning. And so it was actually very humbling. I don't think I could have stopped the tears and the shock. So I taught class to my community, crying the whole time. And everybody was crying. So something in me cracked a little there in realizing that I didn't have the power to hold it back. And I was the ballerina, right? I was used to controlling everything. I could go on stage when I was in the most amount of pain. I could go on stage when I was as sick as a dog. I could go on stage, right? So I was used to that, but this was too much. I couldn't put that armor on. And for those next few days, it was actually the only time in my life that I lived on my own. And I let myself sob, and howl like an animal. The sounds, the painful sounds that came up. I remember my mum calling me after about the third day. Now I have a daughter, I understand even more her worry, but she was just like, you have to stop crying. Like, you have to stop. This is too much. It scared her how much grief I had, because I just, as I said, I had to sit with that questioning of, what could I do? Could I have seen something? So it ended up being such a beautiful lesson in the way that, and now I teach you and teachers that I train, that whatever field you're in, especially any helping profession, that we can give people tools, but it's up to them what they do with them. I can't get in there and make you feel something, know something. He carried this grief of his first wife dying so suddenly when they had a little baby, and he just never processed it, and it was too much for him to bear. And when I look back now, I almost feel like he was preparing to go.
Yeah.
Because he literally got brighter and brighter and brighter and more, strange to say about this fully grown, businessman, he got more angelic every day. And this light around him. So that was a very painful, but very deep and very important lesson for me to learn. And my practice of just sitting and breathing consciously and having one hand on my heart and one hand on my belly, and understanding through the intensity of the yoga that we do, when we put ourselves in positions where the pain feels too much, or the grief feels too much, or the anger feels too much. I felt like when I was grieving his death, that because of my practice, I understood that there, after that extreme intensity, that there would be the release and there would be the relief. I didn't doubt that anymore. It went on a lot longer than I would like it to go on. There was nothing about it being in this nice little box, neat. It was very overwhelming, but I trusted, because of my practice, I knew that there was a time and a space, and that it would move and it would pass. And it did.
Wow, that is such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And like you say, what a remarkable teacher he was for you. And just the way that you describe him, he does sound like a really magical man. Yeah.
My dad and I often say, and this has happened quite a bit, one of the people I lost when I was, well, not a child, but my cousin, who was the same age as me, died just before my 21st birthday in her sleep. Her heart just stopped, and she also had the same kind of frequency as this man, Mark. And my dad and I often say there are those people that have one foot here and one foot in the other world, and they often die younger. They often pass. They're often not here for that long. And when you kind of look back, you can see, oh, they are of a different energy or frequency, and it is like they do have one part of them in the next world already.
Yes, that's making me think a lot about a friend of mine that I was at school with, and she married a friend that I also knew, but we didn't all know one another when we were young, and she died in a car crash. And I always remember Chris saying, my mum would say she looked like an angel, and his mum said something like what your dad said, that she was like an angel, that she was only meant to be here for a short time, you know, that she had this quality about her that wasn't completely of this earthly realm. Yeah, it's amazing.
And a different experience of grief, very similar to what you're saying, was I know you know that I lost one of my best girlfriends, gosh, 6 years ago now. And she died very suddenly, and she had this angelic quality. And she fainted and hit her head right at the brainstem and was gone. You know, they put her in the coma. Often they can bring people back, but yeah, I knew actually that she was, when her sister called me, I could feel that she was gone. But this was a very interesting experience of grief. Almost when she was in that coma, I was in a lot of grief and I cried a lot. And then when she actually passed, and then her mum asked if I would speak at the funeral on behalf of all of her friends. And we'd actually just been in Australia at Christmas. And so Prem and I got back on a plane to go back. And I remember I have some pictures of Prem at the airport. And I when I see the pictures of her, I remember how sad I was getting on that plane. And I think I cried. I think the flight attendants didn't know what was going on with me. I think I cried that whole time on the plane. And I'm with my child, my baby, 6-month-old baby, and I'm crying. And I got there. I said the eulogy that I had said, and I cried through it all. I went back to sit down after I'd spoken at the funeral, and my dad, who was very close to her, and he reached over and squeezed my hand. And then I literally felt somebody squeeze the other hand. Wow. And then the tears flowed more, and I was like, my hand closed in the squeeze. This is my dad's hand, and then this is this hand. And I was like, oh. Her name was Tiffany, and she definitely had that complete angelic quality that you're talking about. From that moment, my grief left. What is more profound about that story is years later, only 2 years ago, so 4 years later, when I was back in Australia, I went and had coffee with Tiffany's mum. And she said, and how about your dad going to visit Tiff every night in the hospital? And I was like, wait, what? She goes, did your dad never tell you? And I think I ended up finding out that he did tell me at some stage, but in the grief, I didn't remember. So she said, your dad went every single night at 8 or 9 o'clock when there was nobody else there, because a nurse said to me, who is that older man that comes and sits and holds Tiffany's hand every night? And my dad said, I knew that you would want to do that. So I did it for you. You know, I did it for my daughter. But so then, of course, I remember that moment of, after speaking at the funeral, coming back and holding my dad's hand and then Tiffany's hand. And I just was like, the grief left, and I was filled with more love and more gratitude for having this friendship that I've ever felt before in my life. I got back to LA, and one of her sisters sent me this massive box of letters that Tiffany and I had written to each other when we were touring in different places. She was like my younger sister, and I really had that feeling of so much love. We told each other in these letters, because we lived in the same apartment together. That's why we'd been so close this whole time. We told each other how much we loved each other all the time. I was like, you can do it. I believe in you. There was so much love in these letters that I'd forgotten about, that I understood why I felt so much love and gratitude, is that there was nothing unfinished. she was this like pure angel that just emanated so much love. And still now, I'll have occasional moments where I wish I could have more time with her in that very human way. But it's very fascinating. I've never had this experience before of this completion that feels so full. And I really understand now, with having the love for my daughter and then feeling the love for her, I understand more how rich the different types of love are. You know, we focus so much just on the intimate relationship love. And now I feel like, oh, wow, Tiffany was one of the souls, the people that showed me what love is in this lifetime. So I have I don't have any of that tinge of regret or pain or missing. So that's a really profound, that was such shock for someone to go so quickly, that I could have a lot of anger and a lot of angst around that. But all I have is gratitude and amazement that I got to have this friendship.
Wow. What a powerful, powerful story. So touching. And this part of her holding your hand, and your dad holding her hand, and she was totally there holding your hand. It's amazing. So amazing. Siri, you made me cry. You always make me cry.
I was thinking that when you emailed me about this interview, I was like, you are the best person to be talking about this topic and this subject, because I feel like I've witnessed your holy and sacred and beautiful tears. I feel like you're one of the people that, your tears, and then what I see, the joy and your shining eyes and the beauty that comes through after your tears has impacted me and my heart. You know, with your courage to do this deep work. So yeah, when you emailed me, I was like, of course that's the work that she's doing, because you have been honestly and truly and authentically and deeply doing this work.
And I really related so much to what you said at the beginning, how your relationship with grief has changed, because I really put my grief in a box. And my dad died in the early 90s, and there was that all your real praise for being strong and being brave and not showing your emotions. So for so long I was so contained, to the point of I was very numb. Like you were saying, people are so disassociated, and I really was very shut down, very, very shut down. And now I have been opening up my box, and not afraid to cry. And it's somebody else that I spoke to. She said that she had just been weeping a lot during this pandemic about various things that had happened in her life. She was like, it was a sort of grief that was coming up. It wasn't like his, really sort of hearty, strong, wailing, crying, but just tears falling, just that sort of cleansing. And like you say, we're not frightened to show that anymore.
There's so much freedom in that.
Yeah.
Peace in that, where you don't have to hide it any longer.
Mm-hmm. I wanted you to share a little meditation for the viewers or the listeners. So would you do that for us?
Absolutely. Very simple meditation. We can just do it for 1 minute. Mm-hmm. That I've done many times and given to many others in times of grief and overwhelm, because we can be so consumed with what we have lost, which is true and real. And I found that this meditation helps me remember that there is so much goodness at the same time that we are grieving, that both are existing simultaneously, that you're still guided and you're still supported, and the universe is still benevolent and still there is still love and beauty and abundance at the same time as you are grieving. So this helps us to receive the support and the love that we are really needing and craving at that time. So sitting, if you're sitting on a chair or sitting on the ground, cross-legged, either is fine. Bring your elbows in beside your waist, your rib cage, and gently cup your hands as though you were holding water or something precious in the palms of your hands, and then just press your little fingers together, so the sides of your hands together. Close your eyes and begin to breathe slowly and deeply through your nose. Inhale a slow count of 5 and exhale a slow count of 5. And let yourself relax into this receiving space.
Siri Guru Name
Breathe so deeply.
Siri Guru
And inhale deeply, suspend the breath, hold the posture. And exhale, rest your hands to your knees. And just take a moment here. Could you even find that gentle smile in your own heart? Remember that even in the darkest of times, you are supported, you are guided. But there is always light right amidst the darkness. And gently opening your eyes.
Thank you so much.
So simple, you know, so simple when we connect with our breath, when we connect with a higher power, whether you believe that's the universe, God, whatever, nature, just feeling into and breathing into that remembrance that we're not alone.
Yeah, truly. Oh, that's Siri. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we close? The time has gone far too quickly.
I know, I feel like you and I could talk about this for hours and hours. The only thing left that I want to really share is to just the reminder for all of us of how natural grief is, how human it is. Whether we're in the corporate world with the armor, got to keep it all together. Whether we're in the spiritual world, there's a lot of bypassing of grieving, of, oh, everything happens for a reason, so just be neutral, right? With grief, with pain, with anger. So I would just say our grief reminds us how sublimely, beautifully human we are. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we're not meant to escape that. We're not meant to meditate that away. That's actually the least spiritual or the least conscious thing you could do, actually putting your hand on your heart and honoring yourself and moving through life and holding a kind space for your grief, even if it's not convenient or you're not able to express it in the moment, holding it very tenderly and kindly and compassionately within you as you go about your day, and telling that little child inside of you, okay, later there'll be a time that we can cry and we can feel and we can write it out. So honoring your grief as something so natural and so normal with the cycles of life. I think that is one of the kindest, compassionate things we can do for ourselves and for others. Yes, it's normal you're feeling like this. Yes, it's natural. It's part of this rich and vast and painful and beautiful human experience that we're all having here together.
It truly is. Ah, what a joy. I'm so glad we got to do this. I really, really am. And I will be putting a link to your website underneath this video, so anyone can take a class with Siri. Due to the pandemic, we can take online classes, even if you're not anywhere close to California. So I just really encourage you to do that, because even just from that little meditation, well, obviously your voice is so soothing, and that, yeah, people will really get a little taste from that 1 minute how much you feel in such safe hands.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you today. It was really beautiful.